On this episode, we visit Switzerland. We learn about a traffic garden in Basel. Then we look at crash testing for pedestrians. We look at road safety in Basel. Finally, we talk with a planner visiting from Croatia. Stay tuned.
We're in Basel talking with Rolf Thoman. What's your position?
I'm the head of the traffic police here in the city of Basel.
What sort of traffic safety issues do you have?
Oh, there are lots of. I think mostly it's the normal kind of traffic problems which you have in every city. Density of traffic, the space is not enough for all purposes, so you have a demand from the pedestrians, but the bicycle, they need space too, and if we want to make the traffic safe, you should have the place for the lanes wide enough, but there's not enough space, so you have the competitive ways of the different traffic forms. You have to organize them properly.
And we were over this morning taking a look at a traffic garden. What is a traffic garden?
A traffic garden is an environment with parts of the traffic, like road signs, like markings on the floor, like signals, like traffic lights. So in this environment, there's no traffic like you have in the city, but it's just for the kids, school kids, to train the behavior, to learn about the rules and how to give way or how to give signals to the other participants of the traffic. So yeah, it's a training space for the kids.
What age do children visit the traffic garden?
Depends if it's organized from the school, then it starts from the 3rd, 4th level, but they can on a Sunday or special, they can use it as well with parents, just to have fun there and get adapted to the different kinds of situations you have there.
And for the school classes, what do they do in terms of classroom instruction versus getting out into the traffic garden?
In the classroom, they learn how to behave, they learn the rules, and in the traffic garden, they can train, and we can watch them, and we can tell them what they do right and what they do wrong, and try to improve their behavior on the bicycle and in the following of the rules.
Are there a lot of traffic gardens in Switzerland, and how long have they been around?
I think there are only 3 traffic gardens in Switzerland. Here in Basel, this one we have was established in 1970, so quite a long time. It's not the newest one, and therefore we are now during winter time we're gonna renovate it and make it new and to the proper use for the future again.
What sort of feedback do you get from parents or students that have gone through training in the traffic garden? Is it doing what it's supposed to be doing?
Yes, I would say so. The parents, they are happy for their kids. There is an environment where they are safe, but they can learn they get used to the traffic situations. For the teachers, they have cooperation with the police to educate the children, and for us as well, we have a base to get in contact, to establish a basic of trust to the kids and yeah, to accompany them on their growing up.
We're in Zurich talking with Felix Waltz. How did you get involved in crash testing for pedestrians?
I was always interested in traffic safety, so I started my thesis at the University of Zurich in the 70s about seat belts and head restraint. And then in the Institute of Forensic Medicine, we were involved with a lot of pedestrian accidents, so we decided to set up a crash site with cars, soft nose, and pedestrian surrogates.
What was the technology like back then?
It was much different than today. So anyway, the first test that I know of cars against so-called pedestrian or surrogates, they were done in the 60s already by car manufacturers. But of course they did not publish the results because they looked very ugly, and so they did not want to compromise their design. And so but even at our time in the 80s then, we used some dummies that were designed as car occupants. And so we had to fix them in some not very natural way. But still, of course, we got quite ideas about the dynamics, how the pedestrian is loaded onto the car hood and then thrown away, and then how he lands on the ground, which is sometimes even more dangerous than the hit against the car.
And people often say a pedestrian gets run over by a car. What happens? What does happen to a pedestrian when they're struck? How do they typically move?
The word ran over is usually used in the newspapers, but is maybe to 90% wrong, because a run over, really, that means if the wheels are running over the body that is lying on the ground. This is, of course, fortunately, is very rare. But usually when you read in the newspaper a pedestrian was run over by a car, it was just, of course, shut in. It's also dangerous, of course, just in quote. He was just hit by the car and then thrown onto the ground. But still, of course, also that can be very, very dangerous. But running, really, being run over, this is the most dangerous thing that can happen for a pedestrian if he is not killed, or maybe if it's just an arm or a leg, then he usually will get so severe injuries that there is almost no chance to survive.
And what can be done to improve car design so that if a car does hit a pedestrian, the results might not be quite so severe? What has the research shown over the decades?
Yeah. Over the decades, of course, people started, as I said before, with very primitive setups. They used trees as pedestrian surrogates, but still, in the regulation today, there is no pedestrian dummy. Of course, in research, we have some models that can be used very frequently, but the regulations just prescribe some biomechanical limits with so-called component tests. So you hit a sphere or a ball that should be the head, you project that against the hood, then you have a leg that is projected against the bumper, and then you can read out some biomechanical readings, and from them one could judge would there be an injury or not, and so you can redesign the car. Just the term is a soft nose, but it's not just a soft nose, it's a lot of other things, because with the design of the car, with the front shape, you also this also has an impact on the dynamics of the pedestrian, so how the pedestrian is then thrown away from the car and how he is hitting on the ground. You can imagine if a pedestrian hits the ground first with his head, or if he hits the ground first with his legs. It makes a big difference. And to control the dynamics of the pedestrian after a crash with a car is even more difficult than just prevent injuries just by the hit of the car, by the contact with the car.
For a pedestrian, it's not just thrown away, but sort of wraps around the car and the head hits somewhere in the car. Where does the head typically strike?
It depends on the length of the hood and on the height. With these modern cars, the SUVs, of course, you have a completely different dynamic than if you, for instance, have with a low design sport car. So with a long hood, or a micro car with a very short hood. Let's start with a short car like a Smart or any other of these new electric vehicles for the city. Then your leg is hitting, of course, the bumper as always, but your head is already hitting the windscreen. This is, if it happens in the middle of the windscreen, it's not all that bad as you might think. It's much worse if the head strikes the A-pillar. So these are the two metal structures left and right of the windscreen. These are much more stiff. But the windscreen in the middle is not all that bad. Of course, I would not like to have such an accident, but still. And with other cars, it depends on where your head strikes, in the middle of the hood or further behind. Maybe in the older times we had the screen, to wash the, what do you call
washers?
Windshield washers. You know, the axis of the windshield washers, they were very, very stiff, and so if you hit the head there, you get a hole in your head and all of that. These now have been covered already for a long time, because one found out by accident analysis that this is a very dangerous spot on the car, these windshield washers. And so it's really, you can be lucky, you strike the car at an area where it's not so stiff, or the other way around, you know.
What's been done in terms of regulating automobile properties as a result of the research that's been done?
The first regulations we were a member of that group and the United Nations organization in Geneva that was starting in the 80s. And there we first tried to set up some regulations with a standing dummy. But at that time, the dummies, as I said before, were very primitive. And so one could not duplicate one test with another, because if the dummy is standing a little bit offset of the first test, you have a completely different dynamic. And so car manufacturers said, with some, I think we could understand that it is just not possible to make with pedestrians, and it's still not, as I said, regulations with standing pedestrians. And so at that time, it was set up the idea that one should test pedestrian crashes with some components, so leg, pelvis, and head. And it's still the case. And in Europe, in the 90s, the first regulations were coming up with these component tests, and so that had really a good impact on car design. So if you hit a modern car as a pedestrian, it's still, of course, a terrible thing, but it is much, much better than before that regulations. It was even worse when you go to a car museum and then you see these terrible things on the bonnet.
The hood ornaments?
On the hood ornaments, they cutting up pedestrians or tearing them apart. It was really terrible. And so this, of course, has disappeared now.
What's the future of pedestrian testing? What have you heard might be coming down the line?
since maybe 20 years there are existing some dummies in research. We call it the Polar dummy, made by an American company, usually designed by Honda in Japan, because in Japan they have a lot of pedestrian injuries, so they're very good in studies preventing pedestrian crashes and injuries. And so we always hoped, but it's still not the case as far as I know, that in the regulations, not just in research, in the regulations, they will come up with some standing biofidel dummy that is representative, a pedestrian, like this Polar dummy, that really the results would flow into the regulations. But I still think there will be some more years until this really can be tested in a way that is reproducible, and one test will be the same as the rest, as the other ones, and so the regulations really can be written down, fixed, and nobody can have any objections because it's unstable or it doesn't really mean this is a pedestrian crash, so this is just a test that doesn't mean anything. But I still think will be some years ahead that we will have crashes or crash dummies like that.
We're in Basel talking with Silvio Suter. Who do you work for?
I'm part of a road safety division, and we are 15 people, and we consist of both police officers and civilians.
What approach do you take to road safety?
We try to include everyone, so like all road users should have space in our roads. And we also try to, like very early on in the planning process, we try to be part of that.
What sort of challenges do you commonly come across in the city here?
Well, because it's like such a organically grown city, you have to do with what is there. So like you don't have that much space that you can simply plan on, so you have to do with whatever is there.
And do you search out places where there have been lots of crashes, or what does it take to get your attention to an intersection or a street? Yeah,
we have like different infrastructure safety toolkit that we use. So like we try to analyze, for example, road accidents very systematically, and then from then on we try to like get some measures out of it and try to optimize the roads that we have.
When you've come up with new design for an intersection to improve where you're having a problem, how does that process work for the stages of getting it approved and then built?
Well, first of all, there is a work group with all the authorities, and then together with them we try to create the most safest solution possible.
What's your ultimate goal? If I come back in 10 years, what can you show me to say what you've done has been a success?
Well, I hope that we have like zero road safety deaths. So we are now almost at that point, but like if you come back and we say like we don't have as like less road accidents and we don't have any deaths, then I'll be happy.
We're talking with Ante Klečina from Croatia. What's your involvement in sustainable transportation back at home?
I work for my county. That's a regional authority for one part of northern Croatia, a county of Varaždin, which is dealing with public transportation issues in my county, also non-motorized and other sustainable mobility issues and projects that we work on, let's say.
What's the status of sustainable mobility in Croatia? Have you been dealing with a lot of motorization in recent decades? What's been going on?
The status is bad. Motorization is high and growing, but it's not only the problem of motorization, it's the problem in the people's minds. Because since many new solutions arrived in Croatia, like primarily motorized solutions, solutions which were favorizing motor vehicles, especially cars, people started thinking that we cannot do anything else without the car. And I would say that's a bit of a problem because the planning started also only being done for the cars. And once this has been done, the non-motorized modes and public transportation mode was highly neglected. And therefore we have a lot of problems because now we're at least up to like 5 years ago, we're planning mostly for cars.
How do you turn something like that around? How do you change attitudes?
There are ways to change attitudes because you need to do a lot of nice projects. Those projects have to have a nice marketing, a nice PR, which tells people what are the benefits of using other modes, especially what are the benefits of walking more. If you walk more, you get healthier. If you walk more, your community lives better. If you walk more and use public transportation instead of driving everywhere by car, your community gets better economic effects. Your environment is getting better. People get more connected and they live better lives. And it can be measured. It can be actually quantified. It brings more money to the economy and to the society, and people have better lives.
You're working on a master's degree.
Yeah.
Where are you studying and what are you studying?
Well, I'm a bachelor of economics, but most of my life I've been dealing with transportation issues and transportation projects. At first it started as a hobby because I liked public transport. I'm a photography aficionado. I like taking photos. I like the stories that are told close to the railway lines, close to the public transport lines. But I started working professionally in transportation like some 15 years ago when I started working with an NGO, which was dealing with questions of promotion of public transportation, rail transport, and non-motorized transport, pedestrian issues and stuff like that. And so it's how it started. And then later on I wanted to have a professional degree on it. Therefore I enrolled for the master's degree on University North in Koprivnica. And University North is working in Koprivnica and Varaždin. Those are two small cities north from Zagreb in Croatia. They have their own university and we have the transportation department, which is, I think, very cool. And our primary goal is sustainable mobility. So we focus on sustainable solutions for the future. And therefore I think it's the right university for me and gives me a good education for the things I do in my business, in my work.
You're here with a group, traveling in Switzerland at the moment. Who are you with and what are you here to learn?
I'm here in front of my university and also in front of my county. We're here to learn sustainable mobility solutions which are applied here in Switzerland. And I think we can learn a lot of things here which we can apply back home in Croatia, especially the things that they do in education, like educating children how to behave in everyday traffic, how to cross the street. And it was an interesting thing to see that they have these great programs for children. I think we can apply similar things in Croatia. There are also some good solutions for street design, for public transportation networks design, stuff like that, which is also very applicable in our country. And with a lot of good marketing and PR and with a very good and positive approach towards the public, I think we can change many opinions back home with the knowledge we are going to gain from this project as well, especially here. Yeah.
And something I frequently run into in the United States is, well, they do that over there, but we're different. Are you going to be dealing with that issue that, well, that's Switzerland, they're different than we are?
Yeah, from most of the projects that I've done so far, I've learned that most of the people are not that different. And people like good solutions when they see them and when they learn about them and when they know some key issues, how it's going to benefit their communities, and then they want to apply good solutions. People want to apply good solutions and good ideas. For example, I was involved. I was working in a project which was surveying mobility behavior in 6 different European countries. And the results from all the 6 countries were pretty much the same. People like good solutions and like solutions which benefit to their communities. And when it comes to public transport, walking and cycling, if those solutions really benefit your societies, your communities, then people like it. It might take a little time. It might take a little education, some nice projects, some promotions, some nice films, some brochures, good websites. But after a while, people start to behave differently and start to accept this new, maybe not new, but these better mobility solutions, which some countries already have.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.
Ja,